Alice's father sat there in his chair, staring at me furiously. His jaw began to clench tightly, baring his teeth. Suddenly, he stood up from his chair, slamming his fists into the desk. "Do you think this is a game, boy?" he shouts at me. "Do you even have the foggiest grasp of the powers that you're dealing with? Do you think this a game? Because I assure you, boy, it is not. There are forces within the magical world that you, a child, cannot understand. This is not a game of childish love or affection. This is not about who likes Alice the most. You, a mere child who knows nothing about the magical world and the events that are unfolding within it, speaking to me as if you've figured it all out, as if you've won some sort of game. I assure you, boy, you've won nothing. This is not a matter for debate or discussion. It is beyond that. Things have been set into motion that cannot be taken out of motion. Things beyond the grasp of a mere child, beyond your control. You will not be able to talk your way out of it. No business or logic or reason will sway it. There is an order, a structure to the magical world, and all those who reside in it. Powerful forces and plans at motion that you have no hope of swaying. You say that you care for Alice? Well, then I ask you to prove it, boy. If you truly care for Alice, you must allow this relationship to end. Because I assure you, if you persist, if you refuse or reject this, then Alice's very life is forfeit. And ours as well. The agreements have already been made. They cannot be undone. If I refuse their end of the bargain, if I refuse them the right to claim Alice as one of their wives, then they'll come after us. All of us. Myself, my wife, Alice, and you as well, young Reginald. And against the forces they wield, there is neither hope nor chance. We'll die, Reginald. All of us. If we wish to live, if we have any hope of it at all, then Alice must agree to wed one of the suitors that I have chosen. That's all there is to it, Reginald, he said as he finally started to calm down, lower his voice, slowly falling back into his seat with a look of sheer defeat on his face. What the hell was he talking about? Alice will die? What does he mean by that? Why? It doesn't make any sense. What forces is he talking about? I thought to myself, looking at him dumbfounded as he slopped back into his seat. Now a look of concern on his face, as if trapped in some loop of thought processes, all ending negatively in the worst kind of ways. I didn't know what he was talking about, but that face made it all too clear that he absolutely believed what he was saying. And then I began to remember the day after my encounter with the man in the pinstripe suit, when I claimed the magical index as my prize and my 3 construct abilities. The man in the pinstripe suit's assistant paid me a visit. We talked and discussed a great many things, and now I'm remembering a very specific part of our conversation. She spoke of forces within the magical world, sides that wish to force people's hands to tell them that they had to be on their side or else, and that basically the only person who could actually stand against it, who could refuse that line of reasoning, was the man in the pinstripe suit himself. Is that what he's talking about? Are those the forces that he's scared of? I still don't understand. What are you talking about? I said, standing from my seat, placing my hands on Mr. Wallendor's desk, glaring at him furiously. You say I'm a child, that I don't understand it. Well, then explain it. Explain what you're talking about. What powers? Who will come after you? Who will come after Alice? And more than anything, why? Why would they come after us? Mr. Wallendor, this is not the time to sulk. You need to explain to me what's going on. You want me to see reason? Explain it, I shouted, gritting my teeth, clasping onto the desk. Alan Wallendor looked at me with that defeated expression. And what do you hope to do about it? You're just a boy. But perhaps you might see reason if I explain it. If not for Alice's well-being, then for your own. So, Reginald, you wanted knowledge of the magical world? Well, you're going to get it. For centuries now, the magical world has been split right down the middle into two separate factions. The Sakar, the dark magic faction, and the Prism Alliance, the light magic faction. All those who exist within the magical world must stand on one of these two sides. There is no other way. As long as one is a member of one of these two factions, then you are under the protection of that faction and are given the rights and privileges that are given only to those who have chosen their faction. Each one has its own set of rules and guidelines. It is not as simple as simply asking to be a part of them, to be one of them. No, there are strict requirements, standards for entry into these factions. If you do not meet the standards and requirements, then they will not accept you, and thus you do not receive the protection of that faction. If you want to know what I mean by that, I'll make it plainly clear. Whenever wizards encounter one another, there are always rules to the interactions, so long as you're a member of the factions. If one member wishes to challenge another, regardless of their faction, then a challenge must be issued. At that point, the two wizards or magic casters can handle their disagreement like men. A simple challenge between the two, of whatever type they decide. It can still be dangerous, but there are rules, boundaries to it, order. But, young Reginald, if a magic caster is not within a faction, then the rules and guidelines set forward by the factions in order to ensure the safety of the magical casters, the secrecy of magic, and the well-being of the factions do not exist. In other words, if you aren't in a faction, there are no rules. They can do anything they want, anytime they wish to do it. Kill you in your sleep if that's what they decide. Take whatever they wish. Do whatever horrendous thing comes to mind, and there are no rules to stop them. No punishment should they be found. No protection, Reginald. In beginning to make my entry into the magical world, I discovered this firsthand myself. The world of magic can be harsh, Reginald, and tensions between the factions are at an all-time high, each one vying for more power and control, more territory, more magical power. And this, Reginald, is where we come in. There are two sets of standards for entry into one of the factions, each specific to the faction itself. In the dark magic faction, the price one needs pay is service. In other words, in order to enter the dark magic faction, you must agree to serve one of their members. Effectively, you belong to them, mind, body, and soul, until such time as your service has paid the price of your entry into the faction. Those that enter the dark magic faction suffer the harshest of treatments. To call it cruel and inhumane would not do it justice. And in order to enter the light magic faction, then one must fulfill a standard. One must be descendant from at least 6 generations of magic casters in order to claim the protection of the Emerald Alliance. The only other means by which one can gain entry are to wed a member of the Emerald Alliance, and thus your family gains its protection as well. And herein lies both our problem and our salvation. We do not have enough magical generations to gain entry into the Emerald Alliance. And normally, to marry a caster who doesn't have even the 6 required generations of magical casters would be considered beneath them, an unworthy partner. But our family has an exception. Those with extraordinary magical abilities, or construct abilities, are a special exception, especially if those abilities can be passed down through the bloodline, meaning there is a high demand for those with these kind of powers. And though normally wedding somebody who does not have the prerequisite magical generations would be frowned upon, if they possess an extraordinary magical power, something that can strengthen the magical bloodline, then you can be accepted. I had wanted to simply wait. We're so close. Just another generation or 2 and we would have been able to gain entry ourselves. But there is no more time. Currently, we are on the cusp of war. The factions are at each other's throats. Everything has begun to descend into chaos. Challenge left and right. Wizards fighting all over the world. And casters who have not yet reached the number of prerequisite generations are being targeted. The dark magic faction has begun collecting them, you might say. What they're doing with them, I can't be certain. But I am certain that whatever their fate is, it is not one that I want for my daughter, myself, or my beloved wife. So, I ask you this again, Reginald. Be done with this nonsense. Let Alice go, for her own safety. If you care about her, you must. Tell me, what is your response, Regimen? What is your answer?